Hey, you there with the mop, come up here and give us a little show. Tyler Rhodes's voice echoed across the mat, his black belt glinting beneath the fluorescent lights. He squinted, smirking. I bet you've never seen a real fight in your life, have you? Grant Miller paused mid-mop and slowly looked up. At 42, he had been the janitor at Rose City Dojo in Portland for just 3 weeks. Usually, he came after classes ended, when only the hum of the vacuum and the scent of floor cleaner kept him company. But that Thursday night, the advanced class was still in session. I don't want to disturb you, Sensei Tyler, Grant said quietly, voice low and calm. He bent down again, scrubbing at a stubborn stain. I just want to finish up so you can continue. Tyler burst out laughing, loud enough for everyone to hear. Look at that. He's so scared he won't even step on the mat. 8 students laughed awkwardly. A few exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to speak. What Tyler didn't know was that the man holding the mop had spent the last 20 years trying to forget who he really was. 20 years since the day he walked away from the ring after an accident that changed everything. A secret so deep that not even his 10-year-old daughter had ever heard it. Come on now, Tyler taunted, swaggering closer with that same arrogant grin he used to intimidate newcomers. Just a light demo. I bet you don't even know a basic guard stance. Let my students see the difference between a martial artist and a janitor. Something stirred inside Grant's chest, like a sleeping muscle waking up after a long rest. His eyes met Tyler's, and for a fleeting moment something passed between them, enough to make the younger instructor hesitate, stepping back ever so slightly, without understanding why. It's just an educational demonstration, Tyler said, his voice now a touch less confident. Nothing serious, just to show the newbies why we respect martial arts. Grant set the bucket down and straightened up. His movement was light yet precise, far too fluid for someone who'd never touched a mat. The air shifted. Conversations stopped. Only the sound of breath remained. All right then, Grant said, voice calm as still water before a storm. But when we're done, you'll apologize to all of them for turning a place of discipline into a circus. Tyler forced a laugh, but it came out uneasy. Apologize? You'll be the one apologizing to the floor after your face hits it. No one in that room knew that Grant Miller was once Grant the Phantom Miller, 5-time MMA world champion. He'd walked away at the peak of his career, after the accident that claimed the life of his best friend and sparring partner. Since that day, he had sworn never to fight again. But some vows are made to be broken, when dignity is trampled. If you believe true strength lies in calmness and self-respect, hit subscribe now. Because this story will make you rethink what strength really means. And then, as Grant stepped onto the mat, the entire dojo held its breath. What happens when the man the world forgot decides to stay silent no longer? Tyler adjusted his black belt with a theatrical gesture, clearly savoring every second the spotlight shone on him. Gather around, everyone. Tonight, you're about to witness a live demonstration of why martial arts has ranks and hierarchy. Grant quietly watched as 8 students formed a half-circle around the mat. Some looked eager, others uneasy. A brown-haired girl with her hair tied neatly whispered something to her training partner, who only shook his head as if to say, "Don't get involved." Look closely, everyone, Tyler continued, his tone dripping with contempt. This is the perfect example of why everyone should know their place. This dojo isn't for... well, you get the idea. A familiar ache rose in Grant's chest. Not because of Tyler's words, he had heard far worse, but because of the tone, that smug tone. That way, people use power to make others feel small. 22 years ago in Las Vegas, he had heard those same kinds of words. Who does this country bumpkin think he is? That night, the pressure from the ridicule had eaten away at him, and just a week later, the terrible accident with Jack Morrison had taken the life of his closest friend. "Sensei Tyler," the brown-haired girl spoke softly, breaking the tension. "Maybe we should continue with our regular class. It's getting late." "Megan O'Reilly," Tyler snapped, his voice sharp as a blade. "Are you questioning my teaching methods? Sit down and watch closely. You'll learn more in the next 5 minutes than in a month of practice." Grant noticed how deliberately he had said her full name, a petty display of authority. He also saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear he had seen in his own reflection 20 years ago, when he'd wake up in the middle of a nightmare. That accident still haunted him. A series of punches. Too fast. Too strong. Jack fell, his head hitting the mat with a dull thud that sounded like fate snapping in half. The investigation called it an accident, but Grant knew the truth. He had lost control. He had let the crowd's contempt fuel his fists and lost everything. "Well then, Mr. Janitor," Tyler sneered, "why don't you show my students how to hold a basic defensive stance? Or is that too complicated for someone whose specialty is holding a mop?" Laughter spread through the room, but Grant stood still. He closed his eyes, and in a single breath, he was no longer in Portland. He was back in Las Vegas, under the blinding lights, surrounded by mocking voices. Moments before the tragedy that changed his life forever. "What's wrong? Scared?" Tyler's voice cut through the silence as he began circling Grant like a predator sizing up its prey. "Or are you just planning to stand there like the floor lamp you push around all day?" Then he touched Grant, a light shove on the shoulder, harmless in appearance, but laced with arrogance from a man who'd never been taught the meaning of consequences. Grant absorbed the push, without moving an inch. His stance rooted deep, like oak roots gripping the earth, and in that instant, Tyler felt as if he had just tried to push a wall. The smirk on his face faltered. "Interesting," Grant murmured softly, almost to himself. "It's been a long time since someone dared provoke me like that." His voice wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but the entire atmosphere changed, replaced by the terrifying calm of a man who had already walked through life's darkest valleys. Tyler didn't understand. He still thought he was in control. "Did you hear that, guys?" he said, forcing a laugh. "He thinks this is interesting. Why don't we show him the difference between thinking you know and actually knowing?" But every insult, every laugh, only awakened something deeper inside Grant. The part of him he had buried for 20 years. Not rage, not vengeance, but a clear, grounded memory of who he once was, when he stopped running. Megan O'Reilly froze. She could feel it, the shift in the air. The way the man stood, breathed, and moved, all radiated control and a quiet power she had only seen in old footage of true masters. "Last chance, my friend," Tyler said, his voice now carrying a hint of impatience. "Either you accept this little demo like a man, or I'll call security to throw you out. And guess what? You'll lose your job, too." Grant opened his eyes, his gaze locked onto Tyler's. And in that moment, a chill ran down the instructor's spine, as if he had just called the wrong name. Of a storm. "All right," Grant said slowly, voice low but resonant. "When we're done, I want you to tell them why you turned a place of learning into a circus of humiliation." Tyler forced a shaky laugh. "Explain? You'll be doing the explaining when you're flat on the mat." No one in that room knew that, for 20 years, Grant hadn't just been running from his past. He had been learning to master his anger, forging it into a weapon of precision and silence. Every insult, every shove, only fed the storm waiting to be unleashed. And Tyler Rhodes was about to be the first, and perhaps the last, to feel its full force. Tyler adjusted his stance, clearly pleased with the heavy silence that filled the dojo. 8 students formed a perfect circle around the mat. Some looked eager to watch the demonstration, while others couldn't hide their discomfort. "Everyone!" Tyler announced theatrically, his voice booming. "Tonight, you'll witness a lesson worth more than 6 months of training. The difference between those who dedicate their lives to martial arts and those who merely mop the floors where real fighters walk." Grant stood motionless at the center of the mat, but something in his breathing had changed. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, he was no longer in Portland. In his mind, he was back at the National Training Hall in Las Vegas. 22 years ago, the night of the World Championship fight against Victor the Demolition Man Petrov. "Look at that country boy!" someone had shouted from the stands back then. "I bet he won't last 3 rounds against a real fighter." Grant had won by technical knockout in the 2nd round, but that victory had cost him his best friend, Jack Morrison, in a sparring accident just a week later. Pressure, prejudice, and one moment of lost control ended everything. "Well then, Mr. Janitor," Tyler sneered, circling Grant like a predator. "Why don't you show my students how not to hold a defensive stance? Or is that too complicated for someone who only pushes a mop?" Laughter rippled through the room, but this time a voice rose above the mockery. "Sensei Tyler." Everyone turned. Megan O'Reilly, 22, a purple belt in jiu-jitsu and a graduate student in sports psychology, stood tall, eyes steady. "May I ask you something?" The dojo went dead silent. Tyler turned toward her, eyes narrowing, caught between surprise and irritation. "Sorry, Megan, but who's teaching this class? Me or you?" "You are, Sensei," she said calmly. "But teaching doesn't include humiliating someone and calling it instruction." Several students exchanged uneasy glances. No one had ever spoken to Tyler that way before. "Humiliating?" Tyler scoffed. "This has nothing to do with humiliation. It's about respect and knowing your place." Grant opened his eyes. Something about the way Megan stood reminded him of Emma, his younger sister. She had the same eyes, the same courage, always speaking out against injustice, even when it hurt. Emma had died a year ago, hit by a drunk driver on her way home from a hospital shift. She was only 24. Another loss, while he'd chosen to hide from the world. Megan, too, carried her own scars. She had lost her father in a similar accident, the man who taught her that true strength is never used to intimidate the weak. And today, watching Tyler abuse his authority, she couldn't stay silent. "Perhaps," Tyler said, lowering his voice into a dangerous tone, "if you don't respect my methods, you should find another place better suited to your philosophy." The air grew thick, but Megan stood firm. "My tuition's paid, Sensei, and I believe everyone here deserves to learn in an environment built on respect, not humiliation." Grant smiled faintly, not in defiance, but with the quiet relief of a man who had just remembered why he stopped hiding. For 20 years, Grant had lived with guilt, for 2 deaths that had haunted him, Jack's and Emma's. 20 years of running, of surrendering fame, of abandoning himself. But seeing Megan stand up for what was right, he remembered who he used to be. "Tyler," Grant said, his voice low but steady. The entire room turned toward him. The girl's right. This isn't martial arts. This is you trying to feel important, by making others feel small. Tyler's face reddened. He spun around. You dare lecture me about martial arts? You probably don't even know what a dojo is. Grant stepped forward once. His posture shifted. Shoulders opened, center of gravity lowered. His stance so balanced that any trained eye could see it immediately. A perfect guard. Actually, Grant said quietly, I know exactly what a dojo is. And I also know that this place stopped being one a long time ago. A shiver ran down Tyler's spine. Something in the man's breathing, in the way he stood, triggered a primal instinct, a warning to stop. But pride drowned out reason. Enough, Tyler growled, dropping into a fighting stance. Let me show you what respect means. Megan watched, torn between fear and awe. The way Grant moved, the restraint in every motion, the rhythm of his breathing. It was all too deliberate, too measured. She realized then, this was no ordinary janitor. Grant closed his eyes and drew a long breath. 22 years of muscle memory flooded back. Every strike, every victory, every lesson etched into his bones. When he opened his eyes again, Tyler Rhodes was no longer facing a janitor. He was standing before Grant, the Phantom Miller, 5-time MMA world champion. Last chance to apologize, Grant said calmly, his voice steady yet commanding. To her, to your students, and to yourself. Tyler laughed, but the sound trembled. Apologize? You'll be the one apologizing when you're flat on the floor. He didn't realize Grant had already read him like an open book. The high guard, the telegraphed shoulders, the unsteady back foot. 22 years away from the ring couldn't erase the instincts that once made him a world champion. Megan noticed several students subtly step back, as if sensing the storm about to break. The air grew heavy, electric, like lightning waiting to strike. Grant stood still, eyes calm, a faint smile crossing his lips. Not anger, not vengeance, but the quiet resolve of a man who had finally found a reason to break his 20-year silence. And as he took his first half-step forward, everyone in the room understood. Something extraordinary was about to happen. The Rose City Dojo fell into a suffocating silence. Every gaze fixed on the two men at the center of the mat, one wearing a black belt, rigid in a mirror-practiced stance of confidence, and one who had been holding a mop just minutes earlier, now standing upright, shoulders relaxed, eyes lit with an uncanny calm. Tyler adjusted his black belt, his movements slow, almost ritualistic. He needed this moment, needed that feeling of power to hide the unease creeping through him. Everyone, focus, Tyler declared, striving for solemn authority. What you're about to see isn't just a regular session. This is a lesson about hierarchy, about why people like us spend years earning this black belt. He patted the belt. The sound rang out in the silence. Grant watched Tyler with the eyes of a man who had seen too much. He recognized it immediately. This wasn't true confidence. It was a mask he himself had once worn, a similar mask 20 years ago, when he'd been breaking inside but had to appear invincible outside. Tyler, Grant said softly, his tone not threatening, are you sure you want to do this? It wasn't a challenge, it was a warning. One last time. But Tyler had gone too far to back down. People were watching. If he retreated now, he'd lose all credibility. I don't just want to, Tyler answered, his voice a notch higher, a tell of nerves. I need to do this, so my students understand that respect isn't optional. A few students exchanged uneasy glances. Cole Turner, a 28-year-old brown belt, gave a slight shake of the head. He'd trained with Tyler for 3 years and had never seen his teacher like this. Desperate. Needing to prove something. Megan O'Reilly pulled out her phone. Not to record, but to take notes. This was valuable data for her thesis on the abuse of authority. Yet something in the way the janitor stood made her uneasy, as if they were about to witness something far beyond a typical confrontation. "Do you know," Tyler went on, beginning to circle Grant like a seasoned fighter, "I spent 8 years earning this belt. 8 years of daily training, injuries, losses. And you? How many years have you spent pushing a mop?" Grant didn't answer. He just stood there, but something in his silence made the room feel heavier. Nina Morales, the youngest student at 19, whispered to her friend, "I don't feel right. Like something bad is about to happen." "Be quiet," her friend replied. "Sensei knows what he's doing." But Sarah Kim wasn't sure. She'd taken a year of psychology at university, and one of the first lessons was, truly dangerous people never need to threaten. They simply are present. And this janitor? He was present in a way that made the room feel smaller. Tyler settled into his favorite fighting stance, the one he'd used to intimidate hundreds of newcomers. Feet shoulder-width apart, fists at chest level, weight pitched forward, the classic posture of someone used to striking in controlled environments against predictable opponents. "This stance," Tyler said, striving to sound confident, "has sent plenty of newbies running." But even as the words left his mouth, he knew how hollow they sounded. Because the man facing him wasn't a newbie, and he wasn't afraid. Grant Miller still didn't move. He stood like a statue, neck slightly tilted, gaze steady, neither fearful nor hurried to guard, only assessing. And as he assessed, Grant saw everything. The high guard exposing Tyler's ribs, the unstable base ruining balance, the over-tense shoulders telegraphing every motion before it began. The weight pitched too far forward. A light pull would topple him, knees insufficiently bent, no quick redirection, fists clenched too tight, energy lost before the strike. 20 years off the circuit, but Grant's eyes still scanned like X-rays. "You know what's interesting, Tyler?" Grant finally spoke, as casually as if remarking on the weather. "For 20 years, I've tried to forget everything. How to move, how to breathe, how to read an opponent. I thought if I forgot, I'd be safer. The people around me would be safer." Tyler frowned, not understanding. "But it turns out," Grant continued, a sad smile touching his lips, "some things can't be forgotten. They live in the muscles, in the bones, in the way your heart beats when danger stands in front of you. And right now, when I look at you, I see it all." "See what?" Tyler asked, his voice slightly unsteady. "I see that you're afraid," Grant replied simply. "Not afraid of me, afraid you're not enough, afraid that even with a black belt, you're still the kid who feels he has to prove something." The words slid into Tyler's heart like a knife, because they were true, completely true. Neon lights washed over the polished floor. Tyler's breathing grew ragged. Grant's remained even and light, like wind brushing a window. Grant could practically feel his opponent's energy scattering. Megan watched them both, and she began to see, not with her eyes, but with the instincts of someone who studies human dynamics in sport. Tyler was fighting himself, his father, his past, every voice that said he wasn't enough. And Grant? Grant was fighting the ghost of a friend who died 20 years ago. This wasn't a fight between two men. It was a fight between past and present. "Still waiting?" Tyler tried to sneer, bouncing on his toes. "Or are you planning to stand there like a floor lamp?" Grant did the unexpected. He moved, quietly. Just a small foot adjustment, a subtle drop of the center, shoulders relaxing into a perfect horizontal line. But to anyone who knew how to look, it was an instant and terrifying transformation. From an ordinary man, Grant Miller became Grant the Phantom Miller, the 5-time MMA world champion. A few students swallowed hard. Megan O'Reilly was the first to grasp the significance of that shift. A chill ran down her spine. She had watched hundreds of hours of footage of the old masters. This wasn't instinctual flinching. It was fight sense polished by thousands of hours on the edge of life and death. She'd seen how Muhammad Ali moved, how Bruce Lee broke rhythm, how Anderson Silva bewildered opponents. And now she was seeing the same thing, right in front of her. "No," she whispered, her hand trembling as she pulled out her phone. "He's not ordinary." Cole Turner beside her glanced over. "What did you say?" "Look at his stance." Megan pointed at Grant, her voice a mix of excitement and fear. "Perfect center of gravity. Shoulders relaxed but ready. Eyes not locked on his opponents. He's reading the entire body. This is a master-level fighter." "No way." Cole shook his head. "He's just a janitor." But behind them, Nina Morales had already started typing on her phone. There was something about the man's face. Familiar. "Interesting," Tyler muttered, trying to hide his confusion. For the first time in years, his confidence wavered. Something in the way Grant occupied space awakened Tyler's deepest self-preservation instinct, one he had never needed inside this safe dojo. Grant took a single step, a small movement, barely a foot. Tyler flinched back on instinct. The movement was so unconscious, so primal, that a few students looked up in surprise. A black belt backing away from a janitor. This wasn't normal. "Is he scared?" one student murmured. The whisper was small, but in the dojo's hush, Tyler heard it clearly. Blood rushed to his face. No, he couldn't be seen retreating, couldn't lose face in front of his class. He had built this reputation for years. He couldn't let it collapse because of a janitor. "Problem?" Grant asked gently, his voice quiet yet commanding, and the room fell instantly still. Not loud, not threatening, just the absolute confidence of a man who had stood in the world's biggest arenas and never walked away in fear. Tyler forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "No problem, just admiring your stance. Did someone teach you that on YouTube?" The line was meant to be snide, but no one laughed. The tension had thickened to something almost tangible, something you could cut with a knife. "Actually," Grant said slowly, his tone like a teacher explaining a point to a student without irritation or anger. "I trained at the National Training Hall in Las Vegas. Ever heard of it?" Tyler frowned. The name rang familiar, like a faded memory from some article he'd read. But his brain hadn't connected the dots yet. "Las Vegas?" he asked, a bit of confidence draining away. "What kind of weekend seminar is that?" A few students exchanged looks. Cole Turner furrowed his brow. He'd heard that name somewhere too. Megan couldn't take it anymore. Her hand shook as she typed fast. "Las Vegas National Gym Martial Arts." The screen lit up. First line. "Las Vegas National Gym, where champions are made." Second line. "Training ground for 15 world MMA champions." Third line. "Home to legends, including—" Her heart stuttered. This wasn't a regular gym. This was a shrine, where only the best fighters in the world trained, where a single private hour with a coach could cost thousands of dollars. She looked up, eyes wide with alarm and excitement, and whispered, "Oh my God!" He trained there. But it still wasn't enough. She needed to know exactly who this man was. Her fingers flew again. Grant Miller, Fighter, Las Vegas. The screen exploded with hundreds of results, and there, at the very top, was a face. Younger by 20 years, but unmistakable. The man standing before her. Grant, the Phantom Miller, 5-time world MMA champion. Megan felt the room tilt. Tyler, Grant remained calm, his tone unchanged even as he knew the truth was about to surface. Last chance. Apologize to Megan for silencing her. Apologize to your students for turning this place into a circus. And most importantly, apologize to yourself for becoming exactly the kind of man martial arts teaches us not to be. The offer of mercy hung in the heavy air like smoke. Tyler could choose humility right now. He could admit he'd crossed a line and salvage a sliver of dignity. But pride, the thing that had fed him through years of insecurity, wouldn't allow it. He attacked. The first punch was technically perfect. A jab, quick and precise, executed exactly as in the manuals. It had worked on 99% of the people he'd sparred with over the years. Grant Miller wasn't in that 99%. What happened was so fast and so smooth that half the room couldn't process it. Grant simply wasn't where Tyler's fist was aimed. His body slipped aside like water through stone. No wasted motion, not a millimeter squandered. Head tilting left by precisely 15 degrees. Right shoulder rotating to draw a perfect diagonal. Hips tracing an invisible arc. Tyler missed the beat, arm extending into empty space. His punch hit air, and by the laws of momentum, his body overcommitted into his own force. Good effort, Grant observed gently, already rebalanced in a new position. Not far, not too close. Exactly enough to control. Clean mechanics? Adequate speed? But you telegraphed with the right shoulder. It pops up about 2 centimeters before you throw. Tyler whipped around, trying to locate him. His heart pounded. How? How could anyone move that fast without a sound? Beginner's luck, he muttered, more to convince himself than Grant. The second attack came faster, more aggressive. Jab, straight hook. It was Tyler's favorite combination, a sequence he'd drilled thousands of times, used to end countless spars and wow newcomers. And again, Grant wasn't there. This time, Megan could follow. Not because Grant had slowed, but because she knew where to look. Grant dipped only a few inches, letting the jab skim over the crown of his head by less than a centimeter. The wind of it brushed his hair. The straight hunted for target. But Grant leaned back along an impossible curve only those with extraordinary suppleness can manage. His spine bowed like bamboo in wind. And when Tyler swung the hook with everything he had left, Grant retreated exactly a half step. Absolute economy. So the glove skimmed under his chin by a millimeter. If someone had a slow-motion camera, the gap between Tyler's glove and Grant's jaw would have been no thicker than a sheet of paper. Interesting combo, Grant remarked, breath perfectly even as if he'd been standing still. Works on a static target. But after the hook, your entire left side is open. In a real fight, that's when the opponent ends it. Sweat beaded at Tyler's temples. His shirt clung wet, despite having thrown only 2 sequences. His breathing grew heavy and uneven. This wasn't normal. He had thrown thousands of punches in his life, in training, in matches, in demos. Yet now he couldn't touch a man he'd assumed had never fought. "Stop dancing! Fight!" Tyler shouted, frustration and panic tangling in his voice. He lunged in, even more reckless. Punches, kicks, elbows, everything he knew. But every strike found nothing but air. And the students began to see. This wasn't luck. This was skill at an entirely different level. Tyler's third rush, a desperate jumble of punches, kicks, and sweeps, sliced emptily through space like blows at a phantom. Each strike threw him further off balance. His rhythm collapsed, his breathing stuttered. Sweat stung his eyes, blurring his vision. Then suddenly, as clarity flickered, Tyler realized something terrifying. Grant was very close. Right in front of him, close enough to see every detail in the man's face. "You! How?" Tyler panted, chest heaving. Sweat dappled the mat. He had completely lost distance. One of the most basic principles of fighting. How had Grant closed in without him noticing? "Tyler," Grant said gently, his tone as calm as at the start, with no hint of fatigue. He stood at arm's length, not threatening, simply present. "Do you want to know the difference between learning to strike in a safe dojo and learning in professional arenas where a single mistake can be the end?" Tyler couldn't answer. His lungs were burning. His legs trembled. Before he could react, Grant did something that defied the onlooker's sense of physics. No visible tensing, no hip rotation, no pulling the hand back to load power, no aggression, no anger. Grant simply placed the palm of his right hand on Tyler's chest, a gentle touch, almost tender, as if checking whether the man's heart was beating. And Tyler flew. Not shoved, not tripped. He literally flew, as if an invisible wave had hurled him backward. His feet left the floor. His body hung for an impossible instant in midair. Time seemed to slow. Then gravity reclaimed him. Tyler sailed back nearly 2 meters, an absurd distance for such a light touch, and landed flat on his back with a thud that made the entire room hold its breath at once. The sound echoed in absolute silence. No laughter, no cheers, no clapping. Only the horrified quiet of people who had just seen something beyond their understanding of martial arts. Cole Turner stood slack-jawed, unable to believe what he'd witnessed. Nina Morales clutched her friend's sleeve, eyes wide. Another student whispered, "What just happened?" Tyler lay motionless for a few seconds, maybe 3, but it felt like a minute. His eyes locked on the blazing neon overhead as he tried to process what had just happened to his body. No pain. That was the strangest part. He felt only an irresistible force, as if a tidal surge had toppled him. As if a strong wind had blown him away, as if every ounce of strength in his body had been neutralized by a physical principle he didn't understand. That's impossible," Tyler stammered, voice shaking. He lurched to sit up, but his legs were jelly, unresponsive. Megan O'Reilly stood stunned, phone trembling in her hand. In 2 years of sports psychology research, after analyzing hundreds of hours of fight footage and reading dozens of studies on combat biomechanics, she had never seen, not even on video, such a display of pure, controlled power. No brutality, no anger, no showboating. Just the clinical, perfect application of a technique she'd only ever read about in ancient martial arts lore, what some call internal power, or Fajin in Chinese systems. But this wasn't myth. It was happening right in front of her. "In fact," Grant said evenly, stepping forward and offering Tyler a hand up, a gesture of respect after putting him down, "it's quite simple once you understand leverage, precise timing, and how to transmit energy from the ground through the whole body. Principles I learned and refined over my 22-year professional career." 22 years. Professional. Those words hung in the air. Tyler batted the hand away, trying to stand under his own power. One last struggle to preserve a shred of pride. But his legs still shook. His knees still buckled. He had to lean against the wall to steady himself. "22 years professional," Tyler echoed, dazed and horrified. In what?" Megan couldn't stay quiet any longer. She stepped forward, phone raised for all to see. Her voice trembled, almost a reverent whisper. "Sensei Tyler, you don't understand who he is, do you?" Every eye in the room turned to her. Tyler looked over, face still ashen. On Megan's screen, dozens, no, hundreds, of articles, photos, and videos filled the search results. All about one man, Grant the Phantom Miller. "Grant Miller," Megan read aloud, her voice shaking with both fear and awe. "Nicknamed the Phantom. 5-time consecutive world mixed martial arts champion from 2001 to 2005. Considered one of the most technically sophisticated and hardest-to-hit fighters in MMA history. Professional record: 47 fights, 47 wins, 0 losses, 0 draws. Retired unexpectedly at age 29, at the peak of his career." She stopped, her voice catching as she read on. "After a tragic training accident, claimed the life of Jack Morrison, his sparring partner and closest friend. Miller never stepped into the ring again." The whole room detonated in silence, not with noise, but with realization, shock, absolute astonishment. Tyler's face went from pallid to paper white. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He had just challenged a living legend. He had publicly tried to humiliate a man whose ordinary punch could have sent him to the hospital. Worse, the man hadn't even needed to punch. A single gentle touch had been enough to show Tyler exactly where he stood. Five-time world champion, Tyler stammered, like a child discovering that Santa Claus really exists, except this Santa Claus could crush him with a pinky. "Undefeated, 47 fights?" Grant nodded quietly, without pride or boasting. "Just a simple fact." "I retired at 29, he said, his voice carrying a deep sorrow. "Since then, I've done any work I could find. Cleaning, maintenance, gardening, repairs, simple jobs, a simple life. No spotlight, no cameras, no need to prove anything to anyone. And most importantly, no ring." "Why?" Nina Morales asked softly, with the unguarded curiosity of 19. "Why give it all up?" Grant looked at the young woman, and in his eyes lay a pain 20 years hadn't erased. "Because I killed my best friend," he said plainly. "Jack Morrison. He was 22. We were training. I lost control. And he never woke up." Silence pressed down. "After that, I realized, strength without control is the most dangerous weapon. And if I couldn't trust myself, it was best not to use it. So I disappeared. For 20 years, I didn't hit anyone, not even in self-defense." He looked at Tyler. "Until tonight." The change in Tyler Rhodes happened before everyone's eyes, painful and undeniable to watch. The arrogant man vanished. The one who always spoke loudly, always needed to prove himself, always leaned on his students to feel important. All of that dissolved. In its place stood someone who had just glimpsed the full scope of his own ignorance, his small, petty arrogance. I didn't know," Tyler whispered, voice breaking. "If I'd known who you were." "If you'd known, you would have treated me with respect?" Grant cut in, still gentle, his words sharp as a surgeon's blade. "That's good. But then the real question is, would you still humiliate another janitor? Another worker without a championship to defend himself? A new student who doesn't dare speak up to you?" That question pierced Tyler deeper than any physical blow, because Grant had touched the root of the problem. Not ignorance, not misunderstanding, but arrogance. The belief that one has the right to belittle others because of status, titles, or their job. Tyler sank to his knees in the middle of the mat, unable to stand, not because his body was weak, but because his spirit had collapsed. And in that silence, every student saw something they would never forget. A lesson that true strength doesn't come from defeating an opponent. It comes from knowing when you don't need to strike at all. Megan stepped forward, her voice steady yet respectful. "Sensei Tyler," she said, "for the past 2 years I've trained at this academy out of respect for your experience. But what I witnessed today isn't teaching. It's bullying, disguised as instruction." Murmurs rippled through the room. A few students nodded. Others looked down, regret on their faces. The truth about Grant, a martial arts legend who had been hidden beneath a janitor's shirt, had completely changed how everyone saw the situation. Tyler drew a deep breath, his voice hoarse with shame. "Grant, I'm sorry. Truly sorry to you, to Megan, to everyone here. I have no excuse for what I did." Grant nodded. No judgment, no sarcasm. Only the calm of someone who had learned too much from his own mistakes. "Thank you, Tyler," he said softly. "But an apology is only the first step. The question is, what will you do differently from now on?" Tyler looked around the room. Faces that once admired him now regarded him with disappointment, mixed with reflection. He swallowed hard. "I'll change," he answered slowly. "It will take time, but I will change." At that moment, Megan spoke again, her voice ringing clear. "Mr. Miller, have you ever considered teaching again? Because I believe all of us could learn far more from someone who understands that true strength comes with responsibility." Grant smiled, the first smile of the night, slow, genuine, light, as if releasing something that had been held in his heart for too long. But instead of answering right away, he lowered his voice. "Before we talk about the future," he said, "everyone needs to know why I walked away from everything 20 years ago." No one said another word. All sat down, silent. The air in the dojo grew heavy, as if they all understood that what they were about to hear would change everything. Grant took a deep breath. His voice slowed, carrying the tone of a man stepping backward into memory. "My name is Grant Miller. I was born in a small town called Bend, Oregon. My father was a farmer, my mother a nurse. We weren't wealthy, but we had each other." He paused, as if seeing again the old fields and his mother smiling at the window. "When I was 15, an MMA coach named Marcus Reeves came to town. He saw something in me, an innate instinct, he called it. He trained me for free every day after school. By 18, I was state champion. At 20, I turned pro. At 22, I was a world champion." Megan fell silent, her hand taking notes, no longer as a research student, but as someone hearing a confession. Grant went on, "But there was a problem. Every time I won, people said it was luck, that I didn't deserve it, that I didn't belong in their world. Not because of race, I'm white, but because I didn't come from a big gym, didn't have connections, didn't have money." His voice deepened. "And bit by bit, those words ate away at me. I began to fight to prove a point, to fight out of anger, not out of love for the art anymore." Tyler listened, his gaze growing heavier. He understood. Pressure, wounded pride, the need for validation. It was his story, too. "After I won my 5th belt," Grant continued, "I started training with Jack Morrison, my best friend in the world. We were like brothers." His voice trembled slightly. "That day was just a normal practice, but I came into the gym angry. A reporter had just written that my win was luck, that I'd soon be exposed, and when Jack and I started sparring, I lost control. I hit too hard. Too fast. Too angry. He closed his eyes and drew a hard breath. One punch. Jack fell. His head hit the mat, and he never woke up. The dojo sank into absolute silence. A few students bowed their heads, eyes reddening. They said it was an accident, but I knew it was my fault. I let anger steer me, and my best friend paid the price. 3 days later, I retired. I gave up the belts, the money, everything. I disappeared. I swore to myself I would never fight again. Never let my fists hurt anyone else. He gave a faint, sorrowful smile. And I kept that promise for 20 years. I worked as a janitor, maintenance, whatever I could find. Simple jobs, a simple life. No spotlight, no cameras, no need to prove anything to anyone. And most importantly, no ring. Not even my daughter knew who her father used to be. Megan quietly wiped away a tear. The story wasn't only about guilt. It was about atonement, about choosing to live smaller to protect the world from oneself. But today, Grant looked toward Megan. I saw a young woman stand up for what is right. Protect others, speak out even when it might cost her. His eyes were warm and bright, like a light switched on after 20 years of darkness. And I realized I was wrong. Strength isn't the problem. The problem is how we use it. Hiding, fearing, avoiding. That doesn't honor Jack. He turned to Tyler. If I teach again, I'll teach this. True strength isn't in making others feel small. It's in helping them stand taller. In knowing when not to strike. Martial arts isn't about controlling your opponent. It's about controlling yourself. Tyler nodded slowly. The room was quiet, save for the long exhale of people who were truly understanding. I get it now, he said softly. And I'm sorry. Not just for today, but for every time I used my position to make someone feel lesser. Grant set a hand on his shoulder, not to assert dominance, but to share the weight. We've all made mistakes, Tyler. The question is whether we learn from them. 3 months later, morning sunlight poured through the windows of Rose City Dojo, illuminating a scene very different from the night everything changed. Grant Miller stood before the class, no longer a janitor, but an instructor. There was no colored belt on his uniform, only plain white fabric. Why don't you wear a belt, Sensei? A young student asked on the first day. Because a belt is just cloth, Grant replied. It doesn't make you a better fighter, and it doesn't make you a better person. What makes you better is the person you choose to be every day. From the 8 students of that fateful night, the class had grown to 32. All over Portland, people were talking about Sensei Grant, the man who had been a legend, lost everything, then found himself again through teaching. But this wasn't an ordinary martial arts class. Today, Grant said, we won't start with technique. We're going somewhere. A bus took the entire class to Rose City Cemetery on the outskirts of town. Grant led them to a simple grave. Jack Morrison, 1983, 2005. He lived to fight and fought to live. Grant knelt and laid his hand on the headstone. This is Jack Morrison, he said softly, my best friend, and he died because of me. The class stood silent as Grant told the whole story. No abridging, no evasion, the pressure, the anger, the punch, the death. I retired the next day, he concluded, not because I was afraid to lose, but because I was afraid to win when I couldn't control my strength. You don't learn martial arts to hit people. You learn it to control yourself. At the edge of the group, Piper Miller, Grant's 10-year-old daughter, heard her father's past in full for the first time. Tears fell, but her face shone with pride. Back at the dojo, she whispered, Dad, I'm proud of you. Grant knelt and hugged her. I'm proud of you too, Piper. Every day. That afternoon, Tyler Rhodes sat in the locker room looking at his new uniform. He was no longer the gym owner. He had sold it to Grant for a symbolic price and now worked as an assistant instructor. The decision hadn't been easy. A week after the incident, he lost half his students. The discreet video Megan recorded spread across the internet. A black belt humiliated by a janitor. His reputation in the martial arts community collapsed. Ironically, it was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Over the past 3 months, Tyler had learned more than martial arts. He learned humility, respect, and how to teach without domination. Most importantly, he understood that value doesn't come from making others smaller, but from helping them grow. Tyler? Grant knocked on the door. There's a new student. I think you'll want to meet her. In the lobby stood a 15-year-old girl with her mother. The girl kept her eyes down, shy. This is Emma, the mother said. She's being bullied at school. We hope martial arts can help her feel more confident. Tyler saw himself 20 years earlier. Awkward, insecure, longing for a place to feel worthy. He knelt to meet her eyes. Emma, he said gently, I can't promise that martial arts will make you strong. But I promise it will teach you something more important. That the strength was already inside you. Emma looked up, a spark of hope in her eyes. Really? Really, Tyler smiled. And I know because someone just taught me that. 3 months after the incident, Grant stood in his office, no longer the tool closet it used to be. The walls were covered in photos, not of his victories, but of his students, their progress, their smiles, their stories. Megan O'Reilly knocked. Sensei Grant, may I come in? Come in, Megan. She placed her freshly finished thesis on the desk. I wrote about the abuse of power in martial arts. I wanted to thank you. Thank me? Grant smiled faintly. I only stood up for myself. Megan shook her head. No. You showed us that true strength isn't the ability to hurt others, but the ability to hold back. She paused a beat, then continued. 5 years ago, I lost my father in a car accident. A drunk driver. My dad always taught me, strength is for protection, never for harm. That night, when I saw you exercising control, even though you could have hurt Tyler, I thought of my father, and I knew there are still good people in the world. Grant's eyes glistened. Your father would be proud of you, Megan. And so am I. You stood up for what's right, even when it might cost you. That is real courage. That night, Grant sat at the kitchen table with Piper, helping her with homework. A 3-month ritual now. Father-daughter time every evening. Dad, Piper looked up from her math. Can I ask you something? Sure, sweetheart. Do you regret it? Giving it up? Being a great fighter? Then afterwards just cleaning? Grant thought, then nodded. I used to regret it. For 20 years, I thought I'd wasted my life. That I should have been somebody important. And instead, I was nobody. But now I understand. I wasn't nobody. I'm your dad. I'm my students' teacher. I'm a friend to those who need me. And that matters more than any belt. Piper hugged him tight. To me, you're a champion. The #1 champion. 6 months later, the dojo was packed. 50 students of all ages and backgrounds, affluent and struggling, confident and timid, strong and fragile. Grant stepped out, beltless, carrying only a heart full of experience. Today, I ask, why do you train? To be strong, to defend myself, to win. Grant nodded, then said, all true. But the truest answer is, you train to find out who you really are. Not the strongest or the fastest, but the best version of yourself, the one who controls power, lifts others up, and knows when to strike and when to step away. That's the lesson I learned the hard way, and I hope you learn it without paying the price I did. The class fell quiet, then applauded. Not loudly, but steady and respectful, as if they'd just found something they hadn't known they were seeking. A year later, Grant stood before Jack Morrison's headstone. He came every week, no longer out of shame, but out of gratitude. "Thank you, Jack," he whispered. "You taught me the greatest lesson. Uncontrolled strength is dangerous. Controlled strength is a gift. I'm trying to live in a way that makes you proud, with every student, with Piper, so that the tragedy carries meaning." A light breeze moved through the cemetery. Grant smiled and walked back to the car where Piper was waiting. "Did you talk to Uncle Jack, Dad?" "I did, sweetheart." "What did he say?" Grant looked back at the graves, then smiled at his daughter. "He said, 'Keep going. Make it matter.' And that's what I'm going to do. When justice doesn't come from a punch, it comes from a lesson." Grant Miller proves that true strength isn't in knocking an opponent down. It's in lifting them up after the fall. Tyler Rhodes learned the hard way that respect can't be demanded, only earned. Megan O'Reilly shows that courage isn't the absence of fear, but speaking up while afraid. If this story touched you, remember, you don't need to be a champion to make a difference. You need the courage to stand for what's right, the humility to admit you're wrong, and the generosity to lift others up. That is the kind of strength that changes the world. Thank you for watching to the end. If today's story touched you even a little, please hit subscribe so you won't miss new episodes every week. Which moment did you like most in the story? Tell me in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, so the algorithm knows you want more stories of justice and healing. If you're watching from a particular city, share where you're tuning in from. I'd love to see how wide our community reaches. See you next episode, A Secret Unlocked by a Late Apology. Tap the bell to get notified the moment it goes live.